Hi, and welcome to another episode of Hot Takes with me, the Silver Fox. It's Friday, and the sun is shining. The sky is blue. There's not a cloud. Well, there is if you're an SNP supporter. There's lots of clouds. It's a downpour. It's awful. We've got a strange sort, not one I normally look at, but nonetheless, there's a report in the New Statesman, and it's saying that the SNP just isn't ready for an election. Now, I think this is something that we can get our teeth into because we know how limited they are for funds. We know that they're deep in the financial hole and that elections are expensive. Those brochures you're printing to throw through doors, they're not cheap. You've got to pay for transport, for the expenses of getting people out there and onto the streets and knocking on the doors, introducing themselves, that sort of thing. These things aren't cheap. You're paying for party politicals. I know you get the free ones. By law, you're allowed so many election broadcasts based on numbers and things like that. But over and beyond that, you've got billboards, you've got magazines, you've got things like this. So all this party political advertising over and above the broadcast is expensive. And they haven't got the wherewithal. But beyond the money, the SNP have got one very major problem. He's called Humza Yousaf. Let's take a look. So the SNP isn't ready for an election. Humza Yousaf and his party have nothing to sell to an increasingly desperate electorate. And not only have they nothing to sell, because their policies are stale, stagnant, unchanging, but also now provably damaging, often corrupt, and regularly inefficient. Indeed, everything they've attempted has failed. They're now seen as a party of either failures or crooks. There is nothing there to vote for. And unless you are wild-eyed, raving lunatic supporter, you've only got to apply a moment of thought to see that it's not going to work. But of course, he is your main problem. He is a very big problem. He is now so tainted by failure on all fronts that he's virtually he's unsellable. You couldn't give him away. Now, other parties over the years have had dodgy people in them, but they've managed to get rid of the dodgy ones and replace them. With the SNP, kind of make the dodginess of these people, they try to make it an asset, and it just won't work, will it? Anyway, for years, the SNP has been renowned for the sharpness of its election campaigns. The party is brilliant at them, always slicker and more focused than the opposition. Like so much else around the SNP, though, the good old days are gone, and they don't look like they'll be returning soon. The party is heading into a general election with an offer that is muddy, diffuse and unconvincing. Now, you've got a leader that is now mired in security issues. He's mired in financial chicanery over this 250,000 to what could end up being effectively Hamas, whose brother-in-law is now a convicted drug dealer, and for that there's more later. Got another video coming up on that front. And so you've got this man surrounded by sleaze and criminality, who, beyond the sleaze and criminality, is actually just a serial failure. He failed at transport, he's failed at justice, he failed at health, and now he's failing as a leader. Nothing he's ever attempted has ever worked. Everything has been an expensive disaster. And yet he's fallen upwards every time and found himself now leading a party whose best days are behind it. He's in a downward death spiral. He is circling the drain, and it won't be long before he drops down it like some old turd in the street going down a hole. He's gone. He's finished. He's done. And of course, at the moment, he's brought in this hate crime act, which is seen as being probably the worst bit of legislation this country has ever seen. And by this country, I don't just mean Scotland. I mean the entirety of the United Kingdom in its entire 5,000-year history. It's probably the worst, most pernicious, most evil piece of legislation. However, we are going to turn against it and push it back at him. But this is the level of the man. He's incapable of even bringing in a proper hate act. Anyway, it doesn't help that the party lacks a substantial figurehead. Far from it, isn't he? In previous campaigns, he had the luxury of putting either Alex Salmond or Nicola Sturgeon centre stage. Two charismatic, compelling figures who enjoyed an unusually personal relationship with the voters. Humza Yousaf, whatever other qualities he may have, doesn't share these gifts. If you meet him, you'll like him well enough. But as equally personal John Major found in 1997, you can dash around the country with your soapbox, but you still can't meet anyone. This is true. Major was always regarded as a very amiable chap. He was the sort of person you'd meet, you'd talk to. You'd come away and you think, what a nice man, what a nice man. But he didn't come across as being a leader. And that was the problem. He didn't have that killer instinct. I mean, I loathe Nicola Sturgeon. But you have to give it, she was a leader. She did have the political nous. Salmond was a leader. He could pull people around him. Humza Yousaf is not a leader. He's just the man that sits in the big chair and he's only keeping it warm for someone else. He's not... People don't respect him. Even within his own party, he's not got that respect. He doesn't have that fear factor. You know, if you were sitting in there in the old days and you said something that wasn't the party line or Nicola didn't like it, she'd glare with a basilisk eye. You could see it. And you see people cringe and shrink into their chairs because she gives them that look. My mother used to give me a look like that, so I understand. But it is like that. And it's... What does Humza do? He goes, and he just keeps doing those mugging faces. He's a joke even within his own party, isn't he? Anyway, Yousaf isn't even most voters' preference for First Minister. A poll released yesterday found that 32% would opt for Scottish Labour leader Anna Sawar, with 31% choosing the SNP leader. Yousaf is preferred to the Scottish Conservative leader Douglas Ross in an SNP Tory head-to-head, but it's surprisingly narrow, 36 to 30%. That is tiny compared. Wow, that is a very, very small difference, isn't it? So the Nats lack a deal closer for the first time in decades. They know this, of course. Yousaf's team are well aware of his limitations, of which there are many, which makes it all the more confusing that the rest of the campaign is so lacklustre. They're just not doing anything. They're not going anywhere and they're not being seen. And the trouble is they can't say, look at the record, because the record is truly woeful. They can't say, look, this is the things that we can do if we had this and that and the other, because when they were ever given powers, they abused them or used them in the wrong way. They're ineffective. They've given up. Effectively, they've given up because everything now is green-centric. You know, all these failed policies that they have on their hands, they're all from the Greens. They've literally run out of ideas. They've had 17 years of total power and they don't know what to do. Anyway, what is the message being sent to voters? In January, when Yousaf launched his party's general election campaign, it was to make Scotland a Tory-free zone. The Conservatives' 7 Westminster seats north of the border are all a straight contest with the SNP. Nat strategists believe the urge to oust the Tories at Westminster might put all these constituencies into play, but that doesn't look likely. Indeed, Conservative politicians are confident that they will retain all 7 and possibly add a couple more. They pick up growing disaffection and even exhaustion on the doorsteps with the SNP and its independence perma-war. Well, yeah, and people are fed up. They don't want independence anymore. The majority don't. And this is the really weird thing. They did the poll, and even within the SNP supporters themselves, 60% don't want the SNP to have total control and total independence. They'll support the SNP, but they don't want independence. That is a massive figure. Anyway, Even after last week's budget, which extended the windfall tax on North Sea oil companies, which sparked a revolt by the Scottish Conservative MPs, the Tories remain relaxed and believe they'll retain seats in the north of Scotland. Well, they will, but they're on a collision course with the party at Westminster, to be fair with the Tories. I mean, I'm not letting them off the hook either here. There is going to be a little bit of a Tory tussle in Scotland. And I think Douglas Ross knows that he's got to try and differentiate himself as Scottish Tories away from the Conservative Party in London. And he can do it. I think they can do it because they can sort of, how we put this, they can brand themselves as the Unionist Party. And that's which they are. I mean, it is the Conservative and Unionist Party. But they need to be pushing the Unionist brand above the Conservative brand, I feel. But there is no one to lead them. They are a spent force with a useless, I mean, I know we call him useless, but quite literally useless leader. There is nothing there to attract people to. And then he opens his mouth and he always seems to put his foot straight in it. Every time without fail. It's not good. Well, not good for the SNP. But it's bloody marvellous for the rest of Scotland. Coming up. So if you were an SNP supporter or a backbencher, be it Westminster or Holyrood, what are your options? Do you stick with Humza Yousaf and know that you're going into a hiding for nothing? Or now, change him, get rid of him now, get in Kate Forbes, give the party that little running time, 6 months or whatever, change of direction, push, push, push. Come out and be, we are going in a new direction, and have someone who's actually intelligent. For all the disagree with her politics on independence, Kate Forbes is a very intelligent woman when you look at her qualifications, and she has had real jobs before going into politics, something that Humza Yousaf really hasn't, other than a call centre. So, not saying that she's good, but what I'm saying is she's sane. And for the next 2 years or so, Scotland needs someone sane at the helm. So maybe time now for the SNP to do the decent thing, put Humza out of his misery, let him go to the backbenches and then resign from Parliament, put Kate Forbes in and say, look, for God's sake, do something for the next 2 years. Otherwise, we're finished as a party. Although I think it's already too late. Anyway, we'll stop there. Thank you very much for watching. Do please hit the subscribe button, ring the bell, leave a like, leave a comment, please share the video. We're nearly at 12,000, so, do hit that. Till next time, stay safe, stay well, and I will speak to you later. Bye.